We're in a series today, starting off for the month of June, called One Hit Wonder. You know what a one-hit wonder is, even if you've never heard of it. A one-hit wonder is like that one song that an artist comes out with, and it's the only song that they have. Think the Macarena. I don't even know who sang it, but it's the only song they got, right? I think of songs like Bryant McKnight, Back at One. It was the only thing that he had. You want to go Korean, we can talk about Psy and Gangnam Style, right? Like it was the only song that he had. And that's kind of what this series is this is just kind of one-off messages, things that we feel like God has put on our heart that we want to share, but they don't necessarily tie into week after week after week. They're just kind of standalone messages. We've kind of packaged them all together. We're calling it One Hit Wonders, Volume 1. And I want to take you back to 1995. In 1995, there was a group called Dog's Eye View, and they had a song called Everything Falls Apart. You can see their album cover there. They were really rolling hard there in the 90s, right? And as you can see, Everything Falls Apart. They peaked at number 66 on the Billboard 100. They were number 8 on the mainstream top 40, and they were the number 1 alternative song in 1995. And that was all that they did with their music career. We all have those moments in life where it feels like everything falls apart. You think things are going well, that one phone call can change your life. Maybe it's you walk in and it's like a spouse losing a job. It could be a conversation with a doctor that changes everything about you. It could be some conversation you have with a spouse or with a child, or maybe you were anticipating something good and something bad happens. We've all had those moments where everything falls apart. This last year, I was at a pastor's conference in September, and it was kind of in Fresno, California, and I had my family with me, and I wanted to take an opportunity to go to Yosemite National Park. We love national parks, and one of the main reasons why we wanted to go there is because there's a mountain in Yosemite called El Cap, and if you've ever seen like the documentary Free Solo, this dude climbs this mountain with nothing. It was incredible. We had to see it for ourselves. I actually climbed up El Cap. It doesn't matter that I only went about 10 feet. The fact is, like, I climbed the mountain, which was cool. I would have gone much further, but I had my family with me, so I was trying to, like, tailor it back for them. But such a cool moment. But there's another mountain in Yosemite called Half Dome. We got a picture for you right here. You kind of see it. So Half Dome gets its name from the fact that it looks like a dome. Now, the day we were flying back to Gadsden, I had some pastor friends that actually got passes to climb Half Dome. Now, this is actually their picture that they took. So if you wanted to go to this mountain, you don't just get to go hike it. It's lottery style. They kind of draw your names, and you have to get lucky enough to win passes to be able to do this hike. And if you do this hike, it will take you 9 to 12 hours round trip. All right? So this is not for the faint of heart. And I asked permission to share this story because I think it's just so cool. So you do this hike just to get to Half Dome, but then you actually have to climb up Half Dome. We got a picture of what that looks like. Half Dome, when you actually get to the top, it's just kind of sheer rock face. It's 400 feet up at a 45-degree angle. I think we got another picture to kind of give you another perspective of what it actually looks like. All right? Now, when you walk up this mountain, you can kind of see like there's these little slats in the ground. That's just like a little piece of metal that they've kind of anchored into the rock. And on the side there, all that is a metal rope sloping its way all the way to the top. You are not harnessed in. There's nothing. This is just a death trap, and you could do it in America, all right, for free. So there you go. If you're a thrill seeker, you can put that on your bucket list. And my friends not only do this hike, they make it all the way to the top. We got a picture of them there. Here they are. That is way too close for me, all right? I'd be way over in the middle, not even anywhere near there, probably sick to my stomach, dry heaving, all right? But they made it to the top. And in this picture, I love this picture here because in this moment, they feel like they're on top of the world. They've just made this incredible accomplishment. As you see, they're literally in the clouds. And yet what was such an amazing moment in one moment turned out to be a life and death situation. As you see those clouds coming in, it wouldn't throw you off because, of course, there's going to be clouds in the mountain. But that sunny day turned into weather that was very dangerous, sleet, hail, and lightning. When you come into Yosemite National Park, there's a place called Tunnel View where you can see El Cap and Half Dome and Yosemite Falls. This was a picture taken on that day from Tunnel View. My friends were that kind of middle lightning bolts coming down. They're at the top of that mountain. And I don't know if you can tell, that's a tornado as well, all right? So they're at the top of that mountain when lightning is striking, when hail's falling down, and there's a tornado that is literally taking place in that moment. And these guys now had to make their way down 400 feet at a 45-degree angle with just a metal rod to hold on to. And I don't know if you know, metal and lightning don't work well together. I don't know if you know this. You can go back to high school physics and you can find out what I'm talking about. And thankfully, my friends were able to slowly make their way down, but as I watch video, they had people, literally you're watching them slipping and sliding down this rock face, and they watched in horror as a woman fell off the side of the mountain 200 feet. Thankfully, she did not die. Can you imagine that? But what a horrible fall. They actually had to life flight her out with a helicopter and take her out. There were people that were indirectly hit by lightning because they were holding on to this metal rope, and they were people hiding in caves. And they actually say, this is a little mountain knowledge for you here. If there is a lightning storm, do not hide in a cave because you actually get hit by lightning twice, once when it goes in and once as it comes back out. People were in a life and death situation. And it was just so crazy. And as I was looking at their pictures and their videos, I was just thinking to myself, and I felt like God put on my heart that, Daniel, one moment everything can be okay and you can lose it all just like that. And as I think there have been so many people within our church and things that are going on where everything seems to be going okay, and then in one moment everything falls apart. It's that conversation that you have. And I think about this, like if they would have known, hey, when you get to the top of this mountain, there will be lightning, hail, sleet, and tornadoes. Do you still want to go? I think that's like a hard pass. You know what I mean? Like, I think I'm okay. I'll buy a postcard and say that I did it, right? How many of us, if you knew that the situation you were about to walk into was going to be as horrific as it would be, how many of us would still do that? Most of us would say, no, I'm not gonna put myself in a situation that's gonna make things worse. No one walks into trouble willingly, and yet that's what was happening here. And as I think like through scriptures, there is a story where a man named Job went through what I feel like is just horrific when life falls apart. I love the book of Job. It actually comes before the book of Psalm. And Job historically takes place at a time about 2000 BC. So before Abraham, if you know Abraham, this is before Abraham. We're talking about this is the flood, and then it's the Tower of Babel, and then like there's Job, and it's a totally different world. People were lived longer back then. There was actually, you can read the book of Job and you can read about dinosaurs, which I think is so cool. But it's just the raw emotion of a man who trusted God through it all. And so I want to kind of read some of these verses with you and we'll walk through it together. In Job chapter 1, starting in verse 1, it says this: "There was once a man named Job who lived in the land of Oz." Actually, it's Uz, but when else can you throw in like one of those references, right? So there it is. He lived in the land of Uz. He was blameless, a man of complete integrity. He feared God, and he stayed away from evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 teams of oxen, and 500 female donkeys. He also had many servants. He was, in fact, the richest person in that entire area. Can you imagine Job just being on Instagram, taking pictures of his sheep? He's like, don't be fooled by the flocks that I got. I'm still Job from the block. Used to have a little, now I have a lot. Like, can you imagine a millennial leaving? All right, you know what I'm saying, all right? Feeling good today, okay. Can you imagine? This dude had a lot. Like Gen Z's like, what is going on right now? What is going on happening right now? All right, so he has a lot, and it's just kind of painting the picture for what's about to take place. He's a very, very wealthy man. It says in verse 6 that one day the members of the heavenly court, they came to present themselves before the Lord, and the accuser, Satan, came with them. Where have you come from? The Lord asked Satan. And Satan answered the Lord, I've been patrolling the earth, watching everything that's going on. And the Lord asked Satan, have you noticed my servant Job? He is the finest man in all of the earth. He is blameless, a man of complete integrity. He fears God and stays away from evil. How cool would it be if God spoke about us that way? Have you met my servant Job? He is a man of integrity. He follows the Lord. He loves me. He stays away from evil. This is a person of character. This is a person that you want to bring home to your parents, right? This is Job. And listen what happens there in verse 9. Satan replies to the Lord and says this, yes, but Job has good reason to fear God. You have always put a wall of protection around him and his home and his property. You have made him prosper in everything he does. Look how rich he is. But reach out and take away everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. All right, you may test him, the Lord said to Satan. Do whatever you want with everything he possesses, but don't harm him physically. That's like a conversation I want to have with God. No. No, remember this friendship thing? That we're not going to allow that. Let him test someone else. I want to be there for him. I got the resources to help him out. But Satan says, if you let me take everything away from him, just watch, he'll curse you. And you can see as the story continues on, it says this, one day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting at the oldest brother's house, a messenger arrives at Job's home with this news. Your oxen were plowing with the donkeys feeding beside them. When the Sabians, they raided us, they stole all of the animals and killed all of the farm hands, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news. The fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up your sheep and all of the shepherds. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, a third messenger arrived with the news. 3 bands of Chaldean raiders have stolen your camels and killed your servants. I am the only one who escaped to tell you. If we were to put this in modern day to be like this, say you're a pretty wealthy person, you get a phone call from someone that's like, hey, I just want to let you know that all your overseas accounts have been wiped clean. Someone took all of your money. And while you're still having this conversation, you get a text message from your broker. He says, hey, I just want to let you know that you've lost all of your stocks, the stock market crash, your 401k, your retirement, it's all gone. All the money you've invested, it's completely gone. You have nothing left. And then you get a phone call from your banker, and it's like, I just want to let you know that all of your assets have been completely wiped out of your bank account. You have nothing left financially. I would call that a bad day, right? And in that one moment, he lost everything in a matter of seconds, and he can't even breathe. He can't even talk to a person before he's getting more bad news right after another. But then listen what happens in verse 18. And while he was still speaking, another messenger arrived with this news. Your sons and daughters, they were feasting in the oldest brother's home. Suddenly, a powerful wind swept in from the wilderness. It hit the house from all sides. The house collapsed. All of your children are dead. I'm the only one who escaped to tell you. Job stood up and tore his robe in grief. He shaved his head and fell to the ground to worship, and he said, I came naked from my mother's womb. I'll be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had. The Lord has taken it away. Praise the name of the Lord. In all of this, Job did not sin by blaming God. He loses all of his children, all of his wealth. Everything is gone in his life except his wife and his house. And his first response is to just fall down and to begin to worship God. When's the last time something bad happened to you? What was your response? What was your first reaction? What was the thing that you started doing? Job's response was to say, God gave it all to me. God can take it away. Either way, I'm going to praise the name of the Lord. And you would just think like this guy has to begin to walk through what I would say is just a horrible set of circumstances. He's lost everything financially. He's broke. And not only that, all of his children are gone. And he's trying to navigate this through. And as you continue to read into chapter 2, you see that Satan comes back and has a conversation with God. And God says to Satan, I want you to pay attention to my servant Job because he has continued to live for me. He did not sin. He's done nothing wrong. And then Satan says, yeah, that's because you've protected his health. And if you allow me to attack him physically, you'll see that Job will curse you and die. And then it says there in verse 7, so Satan left the Lord's presence, and he struck Job with terrible boils from head to foot. God literally tells him, go ahead and attack him. You just can't kill him. Now, I want you to understand that sometimes you might be going through something. I want you to understand that God may have allowed it to do something through you and in you in your life. It says there in verse 8 that Job scraped his skin with a piece of broken pottery as he sat among the ashes. And his wife said to him, are you still trying to maintain your integrity? Curse God and die. But Job replied, you talk like a foolish woman. Do not say that to your wives. Man, I'm just saying, unless she's just talking crazy, right? Like, don't say that. He says, should we only accept the good things from the hand of God and never anything bad? So in all this, Job said nothing wrong. His wife's like, why are you still living for God? Like at this point, it's better if you just die. Curse him and die because you are going through so much pain and suffering. And Job says, do you want us just to accept the good things God gives us? You think we only live for God when life is good? Everything falls apart. He says, I'm still going to live for God. He gives and he takes away, and Job never sinned through it all. What would you do when your life is in shambles, when it just seems like everything falls apart? I love the book of Job because it's so transparent. It just really relates, I think, on a human level of like what we might be feeling when we go through these things. And Job, in this conversation between him and some friends, he begins to kind of talk about what his life was. In Job chapter 29, he says this, I long for the years gone by when God took care of me. When he lit up the way before me, I walked safely through the streets in darkness. When I was in my prime, I'm feeling that in my 40s. Like, man, when I was in my prime, right? He says, when I was in my prime, God's friendship was felt in my home. The Almighty was still with me, and my children were around me. My steps were awash in cream, and the rocks gushed olive oil from me. Those were the days when I went to the city gate and I took my place among the honored leaders. The young stepped aside when they saw me. Even the aged rose in respect at my coming. And what I love about that is Job is just saying like, man, I had it so good. And I just remember walking. He's like, people would get out of my way to make room for me to walk by. I sat in places of honor. But then he says, listen to what his life is like now. Now my life seeps away. Depression haunts my days. At night, my bones are filled with pain, which gnaws at me relentlessly. With a strong hand, God grabs my shirt. He grips me by the collar of my coat. He has thrown me into the mud. I am nothing more than dust and ashes. I cry to you, O God, but you don't answer. I stand before you, but you don't even look. I love that Job just kind of says what he's feeling. And I think that's a great example for us when you're going through just the stuff, like the hardest part of life. It's okay to share your frustrations and fears and just anger to God. Like you can say it. Like if you're thinking it, he already knows it. And sometimes I think there's just something about saying it out loud, just telling him what you're going through. And this is exactly what Job does. As a matter of fact, for about 40 chapters, you can read a conversation that Job has with his friends. And his friends are like, hey, I know you're a man of integrity, but you must have some secret sin. And I want you to understand that just because something bad happens to you doesn't mean you've done anything wrong in your life. Some of you have come from churches where it's like something bad happens, it's because you got some sin in your life. It's because you got something, you're being rebellious, and that's not true at all. Job did nothing wrong, yet he went through all these trials. And then at the end, he has a conversation with God, and it's really just a reminder of how little we truly know as human beings. And if you want to know how the story turns out, I'm going to challenge you to read it for yourself because it truly is amazing. But this message today isn't about Job's life. It's about your life, and really, what are you going to do when life falls apart? So I want to look at 4 quick things. I'll be very quick this morning. The first idea is this: we live in a broken world. We live in a broken world. The moment that God created Adam and Eve, and the moment they sinned, our world became broken. And because of their sin, that brokenness passed on to every single one of us. In that moment of their sin, pain and suffering and death all came to fruition. And because of their sin, brokenness exists in the world today. So if you feel like God is singling you out, that's not true. As a human being, you're gonna go through suffering because this world is filled with pain and suffering. Why is that? Because our hope is not in this life. Our hope is only found through Jesus Christ. Which brings us to our second thought, that our pain, God uses our pain for our good. Now, we don't wanna go through pain. We just want to have the good, but yet God will use our pain for our good, and it's his way of working through us to allow us to experience some things so he could do something in our life so we can see that there's an eternal change that we need that's only found through Jesus. I love what Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4. He says, our present troubles are small. They won't last very long. You see, that's the opposite of how we feel. We feel like our troubles are big and they're lasting forever. And Paul says, no, your troubles are very small. They won't last very long. Why is that? Because they produce for us a glory that vastly outweighs them, and it will last forever. So in other words, the troubles you go through now is going to be worth it because of what we're going to get later, what we're going to experience. So don't look at the troubles we can see now. Isn't that where most of us stay focused? We focus in on our troubles. We focus in on our issues. We focus in on our hurt. He says, rather, we fix our gaze on things that cannot be seen. For the things we see now will soon be gone, but things we cannot see will last forever. He's like, we're living not for this life, we're living for the next life. We don't have to focus in on our problems. We know that God has allowed it for his purposes and his reasons, and he will use it in our life if we let him, which brings us to this third thought. God is preparing to use you. God is preparing to use you. I love this quote from Steve Estes. He says it this way: God permits what he hates to accomplish what he loves. Man, God hates so many things that we see in life, but he's allowed that to happen to accomplish what he loves. And again, you have to understand, like, why does God allow bad things to happen? Who defines the word bad? Do we define the word bad, or does God define the word bad? Because if you want God to stop bad things from happening, did you know he would have to take human beings out? Because inside of us is evil and sin. Left to our own selves is brokenness. All we have to do is turn on the news and you'll find humans left to themselves will always end up worse, not better. There's evil in us. And so if you want God to stop bad, then we couldn't be here at all. So God allows those things to happen to accomplish what he loves even more. And there are countless stories of people in our church who've gone through some just stuff. And I believe God has allowed you to go through those things so you can help reach people now. There are some of you that are going through some things today that God is going to use, maybe not right now, but it could be 10 years from now. It could be when you're older. It could be when you have grandkids. It could be down the road. God is going to use it. But it brings us to this final idea that this world is not our final home. This is not our home. We're trying to make like our realities right here. We're trying to make this planet our final home. And we know as a follower of Christ that this world is not our home. I love what it says in Revelation 21. It says, I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and he will be his people. God himself will be with them, and he will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death. There will be no more sorrow. There will be no more crying. There will be no more pain. All of those things will be gone forever. And I think God wiping the tears from our eyes is going to represent several different things. But in that moment, there will no longer be pain or sorrow or hurt or separation or anger or whatever. It will finally be complete, but that's only found through Christ. And as we live in this world today, it's our reminder that this brokenness points to something that is greater than the life that we're living right now. And so as you go through this pain right now, God is preparing us for something down the road. And he does promise that the Holy Spirit will be with us every single step of the way. That when everything falls apart, we can look to Jesus, who is the author and the finisher of our faith. He's not distant. He is right with you. He has not left you. He has been there the entire time. And our prayer should be that of Job when he said this in Job 1, I came naked from my mother's womb, and I will be naked when I leave. The Lord gave me what I had, and the Lord has taken it away. Either way, praise the name of the Lord. What are you going to do when everything falls apart? Who are you turning to? What is your response? What is your reaction? And know that if you're going through something right now, God is going to use that if you give it to him. What the enemy meant for evil, God will turn it for good. Some of us are fighting a battle that God has already won. All we have to do is give it to him. So in this moment, will you join me in prayer?